One day I might have to write a story where my fictional character, James Grider, has to destroy the life of a certain good man. This man's name will very likely be Jack Korbich. He is a radio personality, and yes, he has been teased for his surname a few times, but it doesn't bother him. He does a news radio show with his partner Keith Schulman. James Grider wants a push for a law that will prohibit use of digital video footage as evidence. It becomes a big debate, and Jack and Keith are very vocal against it. Jack Korbich keeps ridiculing the idea. What, are people supposed to be sitting ducks for bad guys? You show a video to a cop from a security camera showing a guy who broke into your home or tried to abduct your child or murdered someone, and the cop can't look at the video and leads an investigation based on the information in that video under the laws James proposes for society? What kind of insane, ridiculous bullshit is that? James Grider gets mad and telephones the Jack and Keith show and has an argument with the hosts, and they keep shooting down all his arguments against cameras. James gets mad and starts shouting cuss words over the airwaves, and they disconnect his ass. Jack Korbich is such an asshole that he has called this Skylar Attilano kid a psychopath who should be locked up forever, and argued that Elliot Rodger should have been kicked out of his apartment for misbehavior. He hates Elliot Rodger and other mass murderers. This pisses off James Grider. So James Grider is inspired to destroy Jack Korbich's life. But he can't do it in just any old way, like kill him or his loved ones. He has to do it in a way that drives this man, with his easy high-paying radio job, his expensive house, and wonderful wife and sons who range in ages from teens to early 20s, into becoming a mass murderer. That's right, this radio host in his 50s, who is a Republican and has a lot of empathy for crime victims, who despises mass murderers and all manner of criminals, very justice-minded individual who believes in the death penalty and eye for an eye, taking vengeance on bad guys. This man must be driven to become just like the monsters he hates. Let's say money and resources are no object in this scheme. This will be a social engineering scheme. Jack Korbich must be driven so mad, his idyllic life so wrecked, that he will in rage become the very murderer of the sort he despises. The most ideal outcome would be to drive him to such a despair that he will walk into the radio studio while the show is running and gun down his partner Keith, gun down whatever is the latest chick they have who reads the news and sometimes adds commentary on the show, gun down the producer, gun down as many people as he can in the radio offices. But James will also settle for an alternative, for instance, the guy killing his own wife, or killing a random police officer, or even murdering some other stranger who upset him, like in a road rage incident or something. We know Jack Korbich has emotional weaknesses despite his strong moral views. He despises taxes, and California is a heavily taxed state. He despises frivolous traffic tickets. So we could start there. Somehow, portions of his life have to be sabotaged in ways that maybe he ends up in jail for a little bit. Maybe he loses his job. Maybe somehow he is drugged at some trip out of state for a special event connected to his radio show, and a prostitute is employed to suck his dick while he's unconscious, and then pictures are taken and handed over to Jack Korbich's wife, so she gets pissed, and no one can prove he was drugged, and that the blowjob was not voluntary. Somehow he has to end up with his bank account drained, his family despising him, no job, just end up at the bottom like a piece of shit. Maybe get him drinking or hooked on drugs. Then somehow he has to be made crazy enough to obtain a gun. He actually doesn't like guns, they scare him, he says, which will need changing. He will need to obtain a gun and murder someone in rage. It doesn't have to be with a gun. Maybe he beats someone to death or stabs someone. The ideal thing would be to turn Jack Korbich into a mass murderer by manipulating his life for the worse behind the scenes. Make him exactly the sort that he despises and speaks out against on the radio. This way he will get a taste of what it's like to be in their shoes, so he learns that he should have felt bad for them instead. Why would James Grider do this? All because Jack Korbich was insensitive to mass murderers. James would take a man's life and completely obliterate it in such a way that turns a good man into a monster. Not a monster or someone whose life is destroyed, who is sad and might simply commit suicide, but someone who actually takes innocent people with him before committing suicide. Is such a bit of social engineering possible on an individual who doesn't have any prior predisposition to psychosis? Sadly, a book with a plot like this is something I will never get around to writing. The man who provides for me will die by the time I get around to it. That's why it's imperative that I make a few $100,000 off my first James Grider novel when I publish it, so then I can survive long enough until I publish the second one. Then we can enjoy stories like this. Such a plot line that I propose here would only be a subplot in some greater plot. It's an exciting story, isn't it? And James Grider must be perceived as a good guy, doing a good thing in this plot. He is teaching Jack Korbich a lesson by not only destroying his life, but turning him into a monster. Why? Because the man spoke insensitively about Elliot Rodger on the radio, and James needs to prove to Jack Korbich that he can be made just as weak and madness-driven as all these mass murderers. That no matter how good of a person you are, how moral of a person, you are never above becoming a mass murderer yourself under the right circumstances.